Well, remember when 60% of us voted no to the Voice to Parliament? Apparently, South Australia does not, because the state's elected Voice to Parliament members have made their inaugural formal presentation to state parliament in what is the first such address ever made before an Australian parliament. Now, they've revealed they spent their first months as a unit establishing how their roles will function and listening to the views of their communities. Joining me now is Indigenous Forum Director at the Centre for Independent Studies, Warren Mundine. Warren, thank you for joining me. They say that they are listening to the views of their communities, but I've got to ask, didn't the community give its view in a referendum last year?
Well, more than that as well, when you look at the vote for the South Australian Voice to Parliament, only 10%, probably 9% when you look at the figures, actually voted for it. So 9% of Aboriginal people who this voice is supposed to represent actually voted to have the voice, to get people elected to be sitting on that voice. So as far as I'm concerned, not anyone on that committee actually represents Aboriginal people, because they were elected there, and some of them on 4 to 6 votes, out of thousands of Aboriginals that live in South Australia. So this is just another typical situation where a government thinks that they know better than Aboriginal people and they know better than the wider Australian community.
Yeah, I mean, less than 10% turnout, that's a literal drop in the ocean. It's absolutely nothing. So it's just bizarre that they're still trying to forge ahead with this. Now, I want to get your thoughts on this next story, and it's very interesting because all cultural heritage claims in Australia would be independently and forensically examined for factual accuracy. This is under a declaration signed by 7 coalition MPs in the wake of rock climbing bans in Victoria on cultural heritage grounds. Now, the MPs, including, of course, here on our screen, Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, have demanded that all Australians be informed of the decision of cultural heritage grounds. Warren, again, Australians voted against racial division last year, so I think that this is fantastic. Do you support this?
Oh, look, of course I'm behind this. Look, you only have to see what's happening in the gold mine in central New South Wales around Orange and Blaney, where the Aboriginal land councils and the Aboriginal people out there made it quite clear that they weren't against the mine to go ahead. But the minister, went around looking for an Aboriginal person who disagreed. In fact, in the Aboriginal community, we call that black shopping, where you go around and find a dissenting voice and then said, okay, put the kibosh on the mine site. That was just, this is how cultural heritage is used as a weapon against any opportunities for economic development and progress for Aboriginal people, as well as for the wider Australian community. Now here, a lot of people didn't have any problems with the mountain climbing, and hill climbing up the rocks and that rock climbing and so on like that in Victoria. But also the vast majority of Aboriginals didn't have a problem with the mine site in central New South Wales. It's about time some proper legislation come in place in regard to how do we deal with cultural heritage stuff. I always said, for decades, how many pieces of legislation do you need to protect a tree? And so we've got to, make a clean up of all these regulations, make a clean up of all this legislation that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right about the Blaney decision, because it came down to a group of about 18 people who ultimately overturned what could have been an economic powerhouse for New South Wales. It's just ridiculous. Now, before we let you go, Warren, I want to ask you about a Welcome to Country performed at the 90th anniversary of the Anzac Memorial in Sydney's Hyde Park. It was a 9-minute welcome to country. Now, Warren, this was an event for all of us to remember all Australians who died fighting for this country, and this welcome to country included acknowledgements of the stolen generations, local land councils and personal family stories. What's your response to this?
Look, this is a very sacred moment for all Australians in regard to the memorial service that was to be held there. I think people have just lost, something that was the nice idea, which is in regard to welcome to country. They've forgotten what the word welcome is. It's about welcoming people. It's about acknowledging people. That should have been a ceremony that actually recognised all the people who served this country, who lost their lives for this country, and many people who come back injured and maimed and suffered from defending this country. And it's about time we actually started focusing on that and talking about that rather than having all this other nonsense that goes on.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Warren Mundine, really great to have you on. Thanks for your time this evening.